Cabinet meets tomorrow for only the second time since the government was formed, and there at the Cabinet table will be Tracey Martin of New Zealand First, a woman who backed the party's campaign for a binding referendum on repealing what was called the anti-smacking legislation, will be the Minister for Children. She's also the Minister for Seniors. She told me she likes having what she calls the bookends of life. She thinks the portfolios complement each other. But we start with children. What was SIFS? Became the Ministry for Vulnerable Children, Oranga Tamariki, reports it's been decided the word vulnerable is to go. Has that been decided?
It hasn't, actually. It's really interesting. I've made no announcements at all. Since in the 4 days that I've been the Minister, I've made no announcements. So that's a media release. A media report. I haven't put out any releases as such.
Do you think it will go?
I think it was a mistake in the first instance with the First Minister, with Antoli. There was a lot of advice to say, let's not stigmatise these young people in that way. And also there was a lot of conversation that all children are vulnerable at some stage of their lives. But it's not a decision I make on my own. So now being a member of a cabinet, I'd have to go and have that conversation with others, I think.
And $17 million was spent on that rebranding exercise, wasn't it?
Yes, I did actually look at the numbers that the Herald put forward, and if I get right back down to it, I think it was $46,000 was what was probably letterhead and bits and pieces, and $6,000 on signage. So I can appreciate that there's a lot of money in there. I would say this: if somebody makes a mistake, should we just not undo it because it might cost us some money? That would be my first comment.
Which brings us rather nicely to the 2007 amendment to Section 59 of the Crimes Act, which is always called as a shorthand the anti-smacking bill. Are you still in favour of a referendum on repealing that?
Some of the policies that we took into negotiations did not survive negotiations, and that was one of the policies that did not survive the negotiations, a referendum on Section 59.
I was reading an interview that you did alongside Sue Bradford on Q&A, TVNZ in June, and you talked, and you used this phrase repeatedly, of the chilling effect on parents of this legislation, and you described feeling a chilling effect yourself. Had you been smacking your children prior to that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, I mean,
a smack on the leg, a smack on the hand, I absolutely had, yes.
Under what circumstances? What did they do to warrant a smack on the leg, a smack on the hand?
Well, normally it was when one of my children would decide that they weren't going to listen to me. They weren't going to follow my instructions. And so it was a standoff between myself and a child. I'd got to the place where I had explained myself for a number of minutes, and now we were in a situation when it was, you need to do as you are told. And if the answer was still no, then it was a smack on the leg and go to your room, and then we'll talk about it again once you figure out that, you know, I'm the parent and you're the child.
So after the amendment to Section 59, did you stop doing that?
Actually, that was really interesting. My children came home to inform me, particularly my oldest son, I think he was 12 at the time. He came home to tell me that this legislation had changed and that I could no longer smack the kids. And I said, you're absolutely right, but I need you to understand that there's no law that says I have to buy you a Christmas present. So I think we need to have a conversation about how this relationship's going to work.
And so did you smack the kids again after that?
My children were somewhat older by that stage. I think my youngest was about 8, and no.
How do we get this right? How do we protect our children as well as they deserve?
And I think focusing on Article 59, whether it be from my perspective or Sue Bradford's perspective, has not worked. So, like, you know, I'm prepared. That policy did not survive negotiations. So let's move on. And you have no,
sorry to interrupt, because this is a really good conversation and I do want to hear about the big picture stuff. But you have no personal regrets about it not surviving the negotiations? You have no personal regrets?
No.
You're happy to move on? Because if we go back to 2014, this was a very strong part of the New Zealand First platform. In fact, you wouldn't go into coalition with a party that wasn't prepared to have a referendum on repealing Section 59.
That's right. But the world has moved on. We've moved on. If I can find a way with our coalition partners to improve that legislation to make it clearer in law, then we will do that. Okay. But with regard to the referendum on Section 59, that did not survive negotiations.
Can we move on then? And sorry, you were trying to before and I interrupted, so it's 100% my fault. Can we move on to how do we get it right? How do we look after our children as well as I know you and everyone listening would hope we could?
Well, remembering that I've been a minister for 4 days, so I spent the whole of the weekend reading the written briefings, but I'm yet to have an oral briefing from Oranga Tamariki. I think that this is a step in the right direction, setting up a separate agency. I don't think anybody would say that what we had been doing before with regard to SIFs was working. Now, that's not necessarily a criticism of the people on the front line. I think there's some resourcing issues, there's some caseload issues, and those are things that we very quickly need to sit down, address, keep marching forward, and if it's more resourcing, then I need to go into bat for more resourcing.
What do you think you can achieve personally as a minister in a portfolio about which there are so many opinions and through which there have been so many changes?
Well, I think what I hope to bring to it is that as a lens, an interesting lens that not many, I mean, I'm a Pākehā New Zealander, so I'm a New Zealander of European descent, you know, 6th generation New Zealander, but my mother was whāngai into Māoridom. So what I hope to bring is an understanding across both European and the Māori world, and a way that we can bring those together. I don't think there has been enough conversation with say the Māori Women's Welfare League and other Māori organisations, when 60% of the children in care are Māori children, around about that number, in constructive ways that we can try prevention, much greater prevention, apart from just looking after our children in a better way.
Let's look at the other end of life, and that is our seniors. Of course, people are living for longer. There are increasing financial pressures on people, particularly in our larger cities, particularly in Auckland where the cost of living is so high. How do you get that portfolio right when, as a percentage of the population, there are more and more older people than ever before?
Yeah. So that's, I mean, it's, again, minister for 4 days. But I think what we need to address, we need to have recognition. One of the reasons why I'm pleased that I've got both ends of the spectrum is there have been players in politics that have tried to set the younger demographic up against the older demographic. And what I hope to do is to do some bridging in that place. We have older people who are under stress, and we need to look at the rates rebates level and other sort of levels for some of our older citizens. We need to have incorporated into the housing conversation what used to be called council flats, pensioners housing, and so on and so forth. So I want to make sure that I keep those conversations at the cabinet table with all the decisions that are being made in housing, that are being made around social support, etc., etc. The other thing we've got is we did actually, through the coalition, it wasn't the full policy that we campaigned on, but we did get 1 free doctor's visit a year and 1 free eye check a year for super gold card holders. We did get a commitment to pursue the super gold card as a smart card, which would bring more services and more discounts with it. So we hope to just extend and continue to expand on what we've tried to build since 2005.
You've got a big job, haven't you?
I have, actually.
Associate Minister of Education, Minister of Internal Affairs.
Yeah.
Are you excited about it as you set out on this extraordinary journey?
I wouldn't say that I'm excited at this moment. I'm very, very aware of the responsibility that I have just and the rest of the people in Cabinet and outside of Cabinet have taken on. So excitement, I don't think, is the word. It is actually just a real commitment to get across my portfolios as fast as possible, to work as hard as I can to make a positive change and positive outcome for those affected by my portfolio areas.
2 final questions, and look, it's my fault that this interview's gone so long. Can you make your answers quick? Answer number 1, what is your relationship with Jacinda Ardern? I hear on the grapevine you get along famously.
I get along famously with most people. I'm a nice person.
Right, good answer. And question number 2, you were asked on the day that New Zealand First made its decision but hadn't yet announced it if you thought you had picked the right coalition partner, and you said, God, I hope so.
Yeah, which at that time we hadn't picked yet, but I truly believe so. I believe we've made the right choice for New Zealand, and now we have to make it work.
Tracey Martin, who is the Minister for Children and the Minister for Seniors.